Check. Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 3 of the Growth Theory Optimal podcast. My name is Bill King. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Brian Ta. Brian is a growth product manager at Coinbase, one of the fastest growing companies in the world. He was previously a growth product manager at AngelList, Strava, and Haven Money. He was also an SEO lead at Airbnb, and so it's pretty fair to say that Brian has worked at some of the most amazing and fast-growing companies in the world. On this episode, Brian drops so many knowledge bombs on product-led growth, product-led SEO, how he approaches growth problems. My favorite thing about Brian is that he thinks very differently. He's wildly intelligent, and he thinks very, very strategic about how to apply growth frameworks to how you acquire customers. Before we get into the conversation, can you please subscribe, like, share, do all the things that would help this podcast get some traction? It would mean the world to me. Let's get into episode number 3 with Brian Ta at Coinbase. See ya.
Grow. We all gotta grow. This is not optional. That's why we need to start the show. Growth Theory Optimal. Growth is full of obstacles. Spark a hypothesis. You gotta play your hand. Don't just wait and be an optimist. And now it's time to know what growth theory is. Let's build. Bill King, host of the show. Here he is. We going all in. We unstoppable. Check it out. This is Growth Theory Optimal. You're checking out the Growth Theory Optimal podcast with your host, Bill King.
So my story to crypto was back in the day, I used to play poker online. That was my first career during school. And crypto was the easiest way to transfer money, like you were saying, with international. So it just became convenient. And then I had hundreds of Bitcoin at one point, hundreds. I kept some, but it's definitely not. We're definitely not as rich as we should be, is what I'm saying. So,
none of us are as rich as we should be, let's be real.
Yeah, seriously. We're working for the man. All right. Anyways, I am here with Brian Ta, one of my favorite people that I've met through the pandemic, and I'm really pumped. Why? Oh, wait a second. Check. Okay, there we go. All right, we'll start that over. All right, I'm here with Brian Ta at Coinbase, the man, the myth, the legend. Now I've pulled the mic close to me. People can actually hear me. First of all, Brian, thank you for joining the Growth Theory Optimal podcast, which is, I don't know if you would agree, is one of the nerdier titles that I could have possibly come up with, but
no, yeah, thanks for having me. I don't know why you wanted me on the show, but I'll take the compliment.
Well, everybody else canceled, so we had to fly in an extra at the end. Yeah, that's it. No BS. I've had a few cool people on here. I'm really excited to talk to you because based on the conversations we've had, offline, I guess you could say, I think you have some stuff you can bring to the table that other people do not. Brian. So first things first, you have had so many different cool roles. So I was looking at your LinkedIn profile before, which was interesting. I was like, wow, he's done a lot of cool stuff. You started your career as UI, UX specialist, building apps. Then you did a bunch of different marketing internships. And so you went from stuff from a skate shop to Intuit, which is probably drastically different of an experience as a person working in marketing. I can only imagine. Yeah. And then we talked briefly before, but you worked at Business Online, which I had heard of. They're an agency out in California. You were doing interesting role. It was marketing analyst and web developer, which I don't think I've ever heard anybody doing both of those things.
I think they needed a code monkey, and I knew HTML and CSS and JavaScript and I don't know PHP, but you can kind of copy and paste code around. Yeah, they needed somebody to do. They hired me to do SEO, and instead I was just being a code monkey for my year and a half there.
Nice. If there's one thing I know about code, it's that I know how to break it. That's pretty much my job.
Yeah.
Then you went after it. I think that was an interesting time. So you went over to Macy's for a short time, and you were doing SEO and CRO for them. You went from there to Airbnb to lead their SEO, or at least you were an SEO lead at Airbnb, and I'm sure that there was multiple teams, right? Must have been a life-changing experience because I've heard all sorts of crazy things about the growth team and all the experiments that they ran. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Then you moved into product management. So you went to a company called Haven Money, which I don't know too much about, but I thought that is really cool because usually people either start in product and then they learn growth, or they're in growth and they stay in growth. And there's not, you see it every so often, but I think the skills aren't necessarily always transferable. So I'm really excited about talking to you about that. And then you went on this run in terms of growth PM roles from Strava, AngelList, and now at Coinbase. and you do lectures at Y Combinator on SEO, even though you hate SEO, and we'll get into that more. That's probably the thing I'm most excited to talk to you about. And so, like, you've done all these really cool things. I feel like you've been building this portfolio of like experiences and different teams and orgs and this and that. So like you've done kind of similar to where I have, like you've touched a different bunch of areas and you're like, this is the one I like the most. And so let's go double down on that. What about a PM role? Like, did that find you or did you find it? Like, were you at like different brands and you were working with PMs and you were like, this sounds like a pretty cool job? How did that happen? Like, how did you go from like SEO and digital and like growth to like a growth PM? That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's just a function of being at Airbnb. I mean, like, I guess the big thing is that at Airbnb, SEO was a product function, and it's like, I think it initially started off as a marketing function, but when I joined, they were like, it doesn't really make any sense as a marketing function right now because you need to make changes to the actual product. It's not like SEM. Well, like SEM has some, but like it's a lot less than like SEO, where like SEO you have to make broader sweeping changes to the product. With SEM, you're able to like, you know, pick and choose the landing pages and hopefully design the ones that you want. But at Airbnb, it was like SEO was a product function. That's kind of where I kind of got introduced to it. So I think from there it wasn't a smooth transition. A smooth transition would have just been, I was a SEO lead at Airbnb and I became a product manager at Airbnb. But like the leap to start moving on to product management is actually is a little bit difficult. And along the way, just like I say this a lot, is that like the product management, the fun part of product management is actually the execution. the road mapping and alignment and everything else like that just kind of comes with the job. Some people thrive on it. Like I'm not one of those people. But like the thing that I like the most is the growth aspect of it. I don't know, like if you worked at any of these big companies or any of these tech companies or work with like an experiment framework, it's just addicting, man. Like you go and you just like, you run all these small tests, you run big tests, like, you know, results surprise you. Some results don't surprise you. Some results surprise you in the wrong way, where something you think is a home run is like massively negative, or like some small change you did, like, you know, made the company like $20 million. Like that's the addicting part, is just being able to like work with like an entire team to like come together, come up with a bunch of ideas and just like start iterating and moving really, really quickly. Growth is a lot of fun and wouldn't want to like, yeah, just the opportunity to go from SEO to general growth was an opportunity that I fully embraced. I mean, I think that I was really lucky and able, in order to be able to actually move over, because it's not that easy. And I think that's one of the issues I have with product management, just like Silicon Valley in general, is that like product management is so revered in Silicon Valley, and it's very difficult for people to move in. I mean, like everybody wants to get into product management.
It's probably competitive. Yep.
It's like it's ridiculously competitive, and like, you know, functionally, when me being an SEO lead and me being an SEO product manager, there wasn't that much of a difference. Like, yes, there is some difference, and like there's like I've built a lot of like product management skills along the way, but like my skills weren't that fundamentally different from when I was like just doing pure SEO to doing an SEO product management and being growth product management.
Yep.
And like, I don't know, like that sucks. Like people want the opportunity, and it's very hard. There's like those classes, how to break into product management in tech, or like, you know, like Lenny's newsletter, his most popular articles are the ones around like product management, how people can like build up the skill. Like he runs classes and things like that. And like, it's great. I think it's fantastic that he's able to do it, but it's also like such a shame that it's that difficult for someone that's interested in being a product manager to actually do it. But I think you kind of need, you should get a little background in it first, because it's definitely not for everybody. Like, according to I'm sitting in like 10 to 12 meetings a day, and like, okay, right, cool. Like the day ends at 3:30 p.m. after a giant block of meetings, and now I have to block off the next couple of hours to actually like execute, write out docs, follow up with engineers and everything like that. So it's a little bit of a give and take. Yeah,
it sounds like there's a lot more process. Whereas if you're in just like a growth exclusive role, you're probably just in like a pod, right, where you're working on SEO or CRO or something like that. And we've had two different folks join the podcast before. We had Alex Burkett, one of my good buddies, who just does, all he does is experimentation at Workato, which is really cool. And he was talking about some of the frameworks he uses there. And we had Andrew Kaplan on, who was the head of growth at Wistia, and PostScript, and actually we sat next to each other at HubSpot, and so we've known each other for a long time. He talked about growth leadership, so we've got like an interesting mix. I'm really interested in like the PM stuff. Like, what skills were transferable from SEO lead to growth PM, and like, do you believe that you would have gotten into a product management role had you not been at Airbnb?
Oh, I don't think I would have been able to. I'm not that intelligent. I got lucky.
He downplays himself, but he's quite intelligent, folks. I will say, confirmed.
No, I mean, like, what skills? I don't know. I mean, like, I don't really know. I mean, just,
maybe research, like understanding like what the market's looking for, or like, is it more qualitative, quantitative, or like, do you feel like that was helpful?
I think the big thing was, I mean, like, I think the hardest thing to pick up was, I mean, like, I think there's a lot of, like, I think the soft skills that I picked up on how to talk to people, how to approach. I mean, like, as an SEO, for most, like, a lot of the times you have to, like, kind of win people over in order to get people to, like, do work for you, because, like, as an SEO, the only thing you can, like, I think you should add this, and this is a great idea.
That is the most relatable quote I've heard the entire time of doing this podcast. Things people don't think about when you're an SEO until you get to a point that you're the person who owns SEO is that not everybody believes in SEO, it turns out. So getting people to buy in on what you want to do is usually sometimes like lower on the hierarchy, right? So if you're the PM, you're the person who owns that roadmap, so you get to determine what actually happens, right?
Yeah. So like, I think like because like as a PM, you have to coordinate with like a bunch of other teams, like other people depending on product areas that you own. So for example, like at Coinbase, like I own like the entire logout experience. It's like if anybody needs to go make changes to logout experience, they go and they message like, hey, we want to go and add something to the header. Like, is that fine? It's like for the most part, like I'm super chill. Like it's whatever. PMs have to have very, very difficult conversations at times. They're like, oh, maybe you need to go and like work with like the payments team, or like the onboarding or logging team, or the authentication team, or, you know, trust or identity or legal. like you have to go and get their approval, and like being able to like kind of knowing how to talk to them. I think like for me, that was one of the bigger things that came up with SEO, was that like, oh, like I've had a lot of practice like being very nice and being like knowing how to like phrase questions so that I don't offend people and like try to win them. So other than that, like that's probably one of the few things. But in terms of like I think that's about it. I mean, like all the other things I've learned just from working on a growth team. I think like that's kind of the biggest thing, is that like if you work on a general growth team, you pick up a lot of the skills that I think you need in order to just become a product manager. Just because like the prioritization part, the goal setting, just like knowing how to manage time, like knowing that like there is a trade-off, how to run experiments, all these things, like you don't really build them up during SEO. It's definitely a little bit of a trial, but like I also don't think it's very difficult for an SEO person to go and like come into it, because like a lot of things that you need to pick up, a lot of SEOs they want to do. Like I don't think I've ever talked to an SEO that like hasn't wanted to run an SEO experiment, right? Like sure. Everybody wants to run an SEO experiment. They all have ideas, and like they're like, oh yeah, like we kind of did this thing where like we launched it and then we waited like 3 weeks and then we looked at the like nothing scientific, but like there's always the want, there's always the need, and like as long as you kind of keep that drive going, I think that like it takes you a long way. And I think like SEO is kind of in a special spot where like you want to do a lot of things, but there's never any resources that are put into it. I guess like it's the growth mindset that you have when you're in SEO, where like you want to do things, you want to keep on learning. Like that's probably the strongest skill set that you can go for, outside of just being able to talk to people and just like clearly communicating your ideas. I mean, like try. Like, you know how much of a pain in the ass it is to go and like explain what a canonical is? Like, this is the real page. Like, dude, like this is like the URL is the real page. Like, it's like it's not a fun conversation to have.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, and then we can move on to the next topic. But if you could go back to the beginning of your career, would you have started in product first or in growth first, and then if you would gone back to like just being a growth PM today, and why? Like, you're very successful at what you do. You've had some awesome roles. Like, do you believe that the role of growth previously helped you exceed in the PM side of things, or would you have rather started in product and then learned growth afterwards?
I would talk to my old manager at Strava, and like I actually posed this question to him, and I think this is kind of related. I was like, 5 years from now, if you could only do growth, you could only do product management, what would you do? He's like, yeah, product management all the way. I was like, oh, I'm the complete opposite. I don't really care about product management. Like, the growth part is fun. But like growth product management is just like the easiest analog to doing growth. Like on my end, just like I think diving straight into growth and just like doing that has been fantastic. The product management part, it's a skill set that kind of expands outside of growth. I mean, like it's a generic skill set you can take and you should be able to plop into any team and then be able to go and like run wild with it. So like if you learn product management and I picked you up and I dropped you on, I don't know, let's say a team outside of growth, like payments, right? It's like, oh, like now you need to go and like lead the payments team. Like, are you able to do that? Yes, I might be able to, but like I also wouldn't enjoy it. Like I wouldn't enjoy it nearly as much as I enjoy working on any of the growth teams, referrals, virality, activation, engagement. Like for me, like that part is fun, and that's kind of where I would want. Like if I could redo my career over, it's like I think where I started and where I ended up is kind of has been perfect for me.
That's cool.
Like I don't know too much about like. I think with other areas of product management, if I had to do it, I probably would do a decent job, but I know that I wouldn't enjoy it nearly as much. And like the product management skills you kind of pick up along the way. But the growth stuff, like I think being in the right environment, being an Airbnb has really helped me grow to be like as good as I am at my job.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you that. That's one of the things I had on my list of questions for you. Did you take any extra training or like, did you pick up the skill? Because I mean, having worked at some of the more like, crazy growth companies, you learn stuff faster than you do other places. Did you do any external study or like, did you take a product management course or like, were you just asking the product managers like tons of questions and just picked it up over time?
I just kind of picked it up over time. I mean, like, I'm not saying that is the way you should do it. Like, I think I don't know if that's the best way to do it, but like, I just kind of like, I was lucky enough and then like, I'm surrounded by very intelligent people that were able to like, right. I say that I got lucky because like I don't know if I ever told you, but like the reason why I even got this job at Airbnb was because my manager posted on Hacker News on the Who's Hiring thread, Airbnb is looking for an SEO specialist. Like that was really with Airbnb, and I responded to him, and like I had applied to the job like 3 or 4 days before, and they never got back to me. My background was Macy's; they weren't going to reach out to me. That's how I got that's how I got the role at Airbnb. Was like I got very, very lucky, and like I was like I had the opportunity in order to do it, and like being an Airbnb, I think like talking to all of the like digital marketers there, talking with the growth team, like talking to my manager who's now a partner at Y Combinator. There was a lot of things that I picked up and learned from that I don't know that I would have gotten anywhere else. So like I would say that I've been extremely lucky in that I've had the opportunity in order to learn from people. And if you have the opportunity, you should 100% do that. Find a mentor. But like if you think that things can be accelerated by a class, like by no means am I saying don't do it, because I think there's a lot of things that it took me a while in order to pick up.
Yeah, that's actually a similar experience with me. I was when I started at HubSpot, I was just in like a customer success and like account management. I just wanted to get a foot in the door. At the time, they actually didn't have an SEO team at HubSpot, which is crazy to think because they had just built it up from content and links and like basically dominated. Then they hired Matt Barbie, who's was the head of SEO and now is VP of marketing. And as soon as I heard that he got hired, I'd like heard about him on the streets. I was like, I'm going to just like learn as much as I possibly can from this guy, because he comes in, he writes all these wiki pages. I followed every single one and was like, anything you need, like you let me know. Like, I just want to learn from you. And I'm not saying like that was part of my like career. It was more like getting exposure to someone who thinks 3 levels above where you do. Like, I'll never forget the first time I met somebody who told me like what a PBN was. I like was totally brand new to SEO and like literally was just like title tags and like all the standard stuff you learn in like your first V1 of SEO. Yeah. And I was like, wait a second. You're telling me that people buy hundreds of websites? And then I just like couldn't believe that was like actually happening. So that shows you how naive I was. Just knowing that was a strategy that somebody took from their brain and was like, how do I design a system for that? Same thing with that. He like did a 20% increase in HubSpot's traffic just from doing some technical changes. But the more important thing wasn't that he did it. It was he explained it in the internal wiki systems. And I was like, oh my God, like those are things it would have taken me 10 years to learn on my own just through experimentation,
I would actually go and like push for you to like lean on people that you know personally rather than like, dude, I'm like, we've had this conversation before. We're just like, stop following SEO Twitter, man. Like, that's just a ton of posture. Like people go and like say obvious things like, oh yeah, like you should always experiment with alt text. Like, yeah, I fucking know to always experiment with alt text. Like, any SEO knows to go do that. But like, that's a thing that people talk about. Like, they like using big ass words in order to explain like very simple alt text. Like, that's not what you want. Like, you want to learn with someone that's like been through it, that has executed. And if you're like making connections like random ass people on Twitter, or just like following them, like, you don't know what the quality of their work is. I've relied heavily on my own network in order to make sure that, like, hey, like, am I being an idiot here? These people have so much more experience than me. They've been through so much more. Like, you know, I've, like, again, very lucky that I worked at Airbnb because I know people that have been there for like 10 plus years. I can go and ask them, like, hey, I need you to double check my thought process. Is this the right way to be thinking about like how we're organizing the SEM team here at Coinbase?
Yep.
Or
yeah,
not the SEM team, like the SEM product that our product roadmap.
Yeah, I mean that's super important because you get into these like echo chambers, I like to call them, where like everybody's repeating the same thing and nobody has receipts. Like there's a term in poker called like show me the receipts, and it's like, did you actually do that, or like can you have some proof as to what you did? The easiest way to get around that is to just go like find the companies that are absolutely smashing it, and then go talk to the people who are behind that growth. And talk to them, not the people who are the loudest in the room. Like, go find the people that are in the weeds, right? I mean, that's how we got connected. I was like, oh, looks like he's doing some really cool stuff. Probably smarter than me. Now I know for sure, now that we've met. And I'm like, I want to talk to that person and like get to know them. And like, even if we don't like get in the weeds on SEO, it's nice to be in the general vicinity of people that like are doing something that you're interested in and like think differently. You know what I mean? So
yeah. We're always here to learn, and I think as long as you can keep that in your head that like, you know, people know shit that you don't, then you're probably better off. One of the other issues I have with just talking to SEOs is like it's always just like everybody wants to go and show off about how much they know. Like everybody's like, well, like you're technically not correct. It's like, dude, like your edge case accounts for like 5% of the things that we're talking about. But like, sure, if you want to go and like prove to the room how smart you are, then you can go ahead. But like, I'm not going to go participate in this conversation.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, you know, you have to have a BS filter, right? And so one of the questions I had on here, we kind of touched into it, but like, what exactly does a growth PM at Coinbase do? Like when you got hired, or you were like interviewing for the job, they were like, here's the problems, or were they like, how do you gold? Like, how's your team set up? Like, what is a day in the life for Brian at Coinbase? And like, what are the types of problems that you're approaching?
Oh man. Oh, let's see. So
too many.
I mean, we can start. So they initially, only reason companies want to talk to me is for the SEO part. My other growth stuff, I don't think they give a shit.
That's interesting. So they had a problem that they already like knew they were aware of, and they came to you.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we want to rank high, like we want to focus on SEO. So like for them, the very obvious thing is someone who Google's like Bitcoin price or Dogecoin price, like, can we show up? Like, okay, so I'm like, all right, so you want to go and beat CoinMarketCap? Like that's like that is a very obvious use case. So like that's what they come like, well, like we're building up the growth team, we want to focus on SEO. Like, do you want to join our team? And I was like, let me think about it. And like somehow made it through the interview process, and they said yes. Like, I don't want to do just SEO. I want to like growth. Like, I really enjoy top of funnel growth. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, we want to make sure that you grow the growth skills. Like, we have this international thing that is going to be coming up in like probably the next couple of months. You know, within like 6 to 8 months, you should be doing like SEO stuff on top of like international growth. I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds fine. And then like 1 week, and they're like, hey, do you want to be in charge of like SEO, landing pages, performance marketing, and affiliates? I was like, I feel like I don't really have a like. I feel like this is a do you want to, but just like, hey, you own this now. That's the purview of the product teams that I'm overseeing currently. The SEO part is like it's still in its very nascent stages, so a lot of it's just like sitting down, defining the strategy, writing out the content strategy. Like, what should we be doing on like the Bitcoin part, like what we're calling our price pages. But on top of it, just like, how does Coinbase think about SEO in general? Because like they've never had anybody thinking about that. So that it's like I'm a growth PM, but like when I'm thinking about the SEO, it's like it feels like I'm like a director of SEO. Like I am literally dictating what the entire strategy for SEO is. But on like the landing page side, it's like, oh, the OKRs, like we want to increase signups by like X percent, right? So then it's just sitting down and like thinking about like working with a team in order to figure out like what are the experiments we want to run, what does the data say, what are the most impactful experiments we can run, which pages we should go and run the experiments on, like what have we run in the past that's worked, what are we running currently that's not working, and basically just like working with the team, because I think like the really nice thing about the growth team, and I was just telling my candidate this the other day, like I think with SEOs, you really get in your head that like you know everything, right? Just like I know the entire SEO strategy. Like I know when you work internal linking, title tagging, my description. You're not wrong. Let's be like you're not wrong. Like there's a bunch of stuff that you need to do, and like there's always a list, and you just need to go ahead and do it. But like on the growth side, you don't really know what's working and what doesn't. The really nice thing is that then you get your entire team involved, and it's not just like stuff coming from your brain, but like stuff coming out from everybody's brain, right? It's just like all the engineers have ideas, all the designers have ideas, everybody has ideas on what experiments they want to run. So like then then you end up working as a team in order to come with a bunch of ideas. And then really the way that they view my job on this is just like I just help them prioritize all of their ideas, and then go ahead and like then we just start running it. From then on, once we have the entire backlog of ideas, it's just this machine. You go, you run experiments. I go and I write like whatever docs we need to support it. I unblock them. We run it. We get the results. We learn and we iterate and just keep on going. Like that's the really fun part about growth, is once you get this machine rolling, it like you start feeling unstoppable. It's just like, oh, like you go and you start picking up more and more learnings, more and more wins, and you start trying to figure out exactly like what the next thing is going to be. So on that end, like that's the really fun part on the landing page side, is just like, how do we go and come up with experiments, and like let's go and just run as many experiments as possible.
See that right there, what you just said, is exactly what separates your mindset from the PM, like the experimentation, the high speed processes. That's the stuff that like, unless you've been in a high speed, like uber, like hyper growth company, that you don't get exposure to. So you sort of like cap your like learning at like the individual page, the individual like, you know, campaign level. And that's kind of like where you stop. So you said something really interesting that I think is probably coming from your like PM mentality, which is like raising up all the ideas, sifting through the crap, and making sure that you get to the right ones. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, how do you get your team to be like fired up about SEO, the designers, the engineers, like like whatever the team like roles are? Like, how do you get them like pumped? Like, you have your goals. Obviously, you have, you know, you want to grow organic, and it's got to convert at a certain percent because you need this many signups. That's the model. But like, how do you like go about the idea of getting the team rallied around specific like goals that you have on SEO?
I mean, like honestly, it's a lot of just like framing what the opportunity is, and like dude, just like being really fucking excited about the work that you're doing.
Right.
I mean, like you have to love the work, and you have to believe in yourself, and then like your team just gonna follow, because like I mean, like, and that's just it. It's just like a lot of just like framing the opportunities that are there. Just like, this is where we suck. 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 This is where we can, and like everywhere we suck, we can get a lot better just by going ahead and fixing just a small amount of things.
Right.
And like I think that's the hard part for like a lot of people to wrap their heads around. It's just like on some level, you just have to embrace the suck. It's just like I was at AngelList, and like it was like my favorite, like not favorite thing, but like one of the nice things about the culture was that it was like a 40-person company. Everybody knew exactly what features were built and who built them. And like if you wouldn't feature, it's like, dude, what the hell did you build? And like, yeah, it sucks. Like we should fix it. So I was like, okay, cool. So like let's go ahead and fix it. But like it was a lot of just like, okay, we know where it's wrong, and like nobody's gonna get offended. Let's just go and like outline exactly what we need to do in order to fix it and to make it better. That's kind of the mentality that I think that a lot of SEOs need to take, is just that like you can run around saying things suck, and like that's fine, that's a lot of fun, but like you also need to make sure that like you have a clear guide, like a clear set of things that you need to work on, and exactly like what process that you want to do it. And like the biggest thing is just the prioritization part, because there's a lot of difference between like marketing and like product, and I've run into this a lot, and I'm not going to call anybody. It's just like I've run, like people want to do things just because it looks nice, or just like it's a small thing that annoys them,
or it's right.
Yeah, like, it's just like, dude, like that's going to have no impact on the business. Like I'm not going to we're not going to waste engineering and design resources in order to go pursue this. I think that's one of the hardest things in order to get over, because like I fall into this trap too. I don't know if you follow my Twitter thing, but like for the longest time, if you Googled AngelList, the first result was a paid ad from Angie's List. And like it became my personal, even after I left, it was my personal mission to get Angie's List to stop bidding on it. And like obviously this takes no engineering time, but like the analog is there, right? It was just like oh, like this, like it's a small thing that has literally no effect on the business. I know it doesn't. Anybody Googling AngelList isn't going to click on Angie's List. They just fucked up their SEM. But like you have to know when something is worth pursuing and when you should just drop it, or like and just like, hey, like this is not going to have an effect on the business. Like it's not worth your time. Once like if you can do that and you can do it well, then your team just going to get hyped up. And like one of the nice things is always having an experimentation framework, because nothing gets people more hyped than being like, I made this like tiny code change and I made the company X amount of money, or like I increased the amount of people that were able to log in and use the website by 25%. The other things are you well equipped enough in order to track your changes? Because there is nothing better on a growth team or on an SEO team, or like any type of team, than like a steady drumbeat of just like wins after wins after wins after wins. You know that 80% are going to fail, but like 1 out of every 10, 2 out of every 10, like these experiments are going to go. That like you're going to get these wins, and being able to just like have a constant stream of like your engineers feeling really, really fantastic about the systems, your designers knowing that everything they're designing is working well. Once you figure out that machine, it's like there's literally nothing like it, because you feel unstoppable.
What I'm hearing from this conversation is that mentality is probably a big thing for your team. Like making sure people are enthusiastic about what they're doing, pushing through like obvious failure, right? Because not every experiment works. But you have to keep enthusiastic when you're doing a high volume of experiments, because you will just deal with a certain amount of failure. This is something that I'm really excited about. I have Dylan Wiseman, who's a very high stakes poker player. He used to be at CoinDesk and like this and that. So he's coming on soon. And I'm really pumped to talk about that, because like just the fact of being comfortable with failure, not in the sense that like you're just saying, screw it, like we'll do whatever and there's no consequences. It's more like keeping a certain level of enthusiasm about the objective that you're doing. And when things go wrong, figuring out how to fix it. And when things go right, like being humble enough to go, what should I do better next time, right?
Yeah, things go wrong. And if you're working in SEO, like, shit, dude, like, you're going to fuck up. Embrace it. Just like, and when you screw up, do a retro. Go think to yourself, go work with your team. Like, what did we do wrong? What can we do better? Like, every single failure is another learning opportunity in order to set you up for another experiment. So just like, don't get too down if things aren't working out, because, if you like, it'll work out at some point. You just have to keep the faith. And if it's really, really not working out, you should rethink your thought process.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. I think you just dropped the knowledge bomb right there. That'll be a good quote for the podcast. All right. So out of all the questions that I have listed for you, Brian, this is the one that I am most excited about.
Oh, God.
You ready for this?
No.
So you have deep experience in SEO. You've worked at a bunch of different consumer brands. We have talked many times off the record in the dark messages. You just went through, I think, a framework and a mentality that I only hear at high growth, large sample, quick moving companies that is more of about like a PM and like more of a quote unquote like growth. I know people say that word all the time, but like the way I think about growth is it's the scientific method applied to KPIs, and the people who do the most experiments that have the biggest impact and the least amount of risk. Well, I don't know, maybe that's not true, but those are the teams that win. And like, tell me what you think that the average SEO gets wrong that the teams that you've worked on get right. Because I feel like you have unique experience where you've worked at now, several companies that are well known for not only just SEO, but they're known for growth. They're known for the culture. They're known for doing stuff that gets them to the nth percent that other companies don't achieve. And so what is it, if you were to approach the SEO world and make like, hey, this is what we're doing, like, here's what's wrong with the traditional approach of SEO. Brian, you have the microphone. Let's hear what Brian's state of the world of SEO, because I would love to hear just like, you kind of tiptoed into it, but like, what are the things people need to be doing in SEO that they're spending too much time thinking about, or they should be thinking about these things more time, like spending more time in these problems? Like, what are some of those things you see?
I think the biggest, not biggest, but like, I think people just work on the wrong fucking thing all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, people want like, this just goes back to like, just like being able to differentiate between marketing and actual impact. People don't ever work on the actual impact because it's really fucking hard. Like that's the problem, is that like with SEO, because it's longer term. I'm not going to say it's long term. It's really hard to go and measure impact, because like everyone's like, oh, we're going to work on like a bunch of long form blog articles in order to increase traffic. Well, like, fuck, who gives a shit if you go drive a bunch of traffic? Is any of that traffic converting? And if it's not, then like, you need to rethink your strategy. And I think the hard part is just figuring out like, what your actual strategy is that's actually going to go ahead and like lead to a conversion. If your KPI is just like you're an advertising site and it's to get eyes, and yeah, like go wild, everything I just said was like completely wrong. But like if it's not like and you need and like you just need to figure out like how do you achieve business impact and then go after it. And like not all SEO is long term. I mean, like we run multiple experiments at Airbnb, like hundreds for SEO experiments where just like you can see changes in SEO within like 2 weeks, or like for more impactful stuff within like a week. So like it's not like, oh, SEO is like a 6-month investment. No, dude, like SEO, like you should be able to see it in like a month. At Shopify, we ended up 5xing traffic in like a quarter. And in that quarter, we were working on like a bunch of other things. All the SEO work was like, I loaded it up front in order to like, these are the SEO technical things that we need to get done. And like, it was probably like maybe 3 weeks of work at most for like one engineer. Everything else is like, how do we make this product better? How do we like provide value to the customer when they're visiting their pages? I think the hard part with SEO is like being able to figure out exactly what problem you're trying to solve and like trying not to think too long term, because like I think the problem with SEO is just so like everybody thinks big picture. I want to like if you're in finance, I want to be the next NerdWallet, or like I want to be the next Investopedia, or like, you know, if you're in travel, like, oh, I want to be Airbnb, or I want to be TripAdvisor, and just like you have to figure out exactly like where your niche is and like find out where you can win. And if you don't do that, you're gonna have a hard time just winning, because like, yeah, you might be a fine SEO, you might have good ideas, but like at the end of the day, what sets you apart is like, were you successful and did you have impact? I haven't proven this at Coinbase, to be fair. Like it's like I have a bunch of ideas and I talk a bunch, but I haven't proven anything, which is why like the thing is like I don't have a high, like we've talked, I don't have a super high opinion myself, is because like I've met so many more people that have had so much impact doing things, and like when I compare myself to them, like I haven't done much. Sure, I've worked at these big name companies, I've like increased traffic. I go and I look at them and like, you know, my friend at Y Combinator, he established the entire Airbnb referral program, which was like a huge thing. Like Airbnb's referral program is fucking amazing. And like I go like, oh yeah, I increased traffic at Airbnb. Like cool. Like what does that do? That doesn't do anything. I would say part of the time SEO isn't the answer. Like a lot of companies come up to me like, hey, we want to invest in SEO, and like I would say 90%. I'm like, dude, like go invest in some other acquisition channel. Like this isn't it. You have to know when it works and when it doesn't, just being able to admit that like, hey, this isn't the thing, because SEO is not a silver bullet. You can theoretically use it for anything, but like, you know, like for most of the time, if you really care about organic or just care about search, like for the short term, for a startup, investing in your SEM program is probably going to yield better short-term learnings, maybe not results, but at least learnings. And like being able to juggle between like, oh, am I working on the right thing and should I be working on it? Like those are the two things that like I think most SEOs need to come to grips with, is that like, hey, this strategy might not be it. Or like you go and you run an agency. Well, I guess like if you're an agency, you just kind of take everything, which also I don't.
If you're an SEO agency and somebody comes to you and says, hey, can you help me with SEO? You're like, yes, I can, in fact.
Yeah. But like, we just like, can you do SEO? I was like, no. I'm like, don't do it. And don't go to an agency and don't pay them money, because like this isn't a thing for you. Yeah. Lenny had a friend who's like, hey, like we were thinking about SEO for this product. I signed NDAs, I can't talk about it. I was like, dude, don't do it. But then like 5 minutes, I was like, yeah, this isn't worth your time, dude. Like go use your, like if you're going to invest in content, like you should think of your content as like a conversion play, not an SEO play. There's like people are going to be looking at the content in order to get affirmation that your product is decent. But like for an SEO play, like that's like, it's like 3 or 4 years down the line. It doesn't make sense for everybody. Being able to recognize, like, should I work on it at first? Or if SEO is a viable means of acquisition? And if it is, knowing that like you're going after the right thing, because you know, like traffic for the sake of traffic is just a waste of time. And I think that specific thing gets lost all the fucking time, as everybody just wants to go, just like, oh yeah, I increased traffic for 5x. I mean, I said the exact same thing, right? I was like, I increased traffic to Shopify by 5x, but like, what does that actually mean? Did that lead to people converting? Like, and if it didn't lead to people converting, what was the thought process in order for you to go ahead and do that? And if there is no thought process and you just like got a bunch of traffic and leads to a dead end, like, why? Like, is that actually valuable to the company? If it's not, then why did you spend time doing it? And like, that's the hardest thing in order to figure out.
Do you think that the success you've had in your career is because you put a lot more thought into the industry, the niche, the business, the problem, what impact you can directly have as that like growth person right out of the gate? or like, because it sounds like you have a very specific idea of where there's a good fit for your skills and how you can help, previous to just taking a job and then going, I'll figure it out later on. Like, do you think that that's part of the recipe, or like, do you think that most try to make SEO work no matter what, when it really shouldn't be the right approach for certain companies? And like, do you think that's where SEOs get it wrong? Like, they come in and they're like, I'm the SEO manager at this, SaaS company, and my job is to do SEO. So I'm going to go build these what is posts. I'm going to go do these other things because that's the playbook. Are you more think more deeply about like, where's the opportunity? Like, how much impact could you possibly have with SEO, and then apply a different like lens on how you would solve that problem? I'm really curious, because that some people might be hearing this and not have any idea what you're talking about, because they're like, wait a second, SEO is just creating content that like our target customers are looking for. Because could you go a little bit deeper on how you think about that?
Every single job that I've taken, I think post Haven, has been, I think this is one of the big things I learned work as a growth product manager at Haven, was when I come in, how much of an impact can I have? And like, is there is there space for me to succeed? And like, I think a lot of people come in, like, what I am most nervous about is people hiring me just to hire me because they know that I know how to do SEO. And like, is there actually space for me to actually go do something? All right, if you want to hire me as SEO, like, what is the actual opportunity that I can see that you have already invested towards in order for me to actually build upon? Because otherwise, like, then I'm starting from scratch. I have to go convince a bunch of people. People might not be bought in. With Coinbase, is the exact same thing. Just like, people want to look up Dogecoin price, people want to look up Bitcoin price, they want to look up Cardano. Like, they're using, like, is there an actual active use case where I can have an actual impact? Whereas, like, if I worked at Stripe, like, I don't know what I would do there. Like, they had an organic acquisition lead, and I was like, well, Stripe is a really cool company, and like, if I talk to them, I'm pretty sure they would have something. But like, I know what my skill set is. I'm good at doing product. I'm good at thinking about SEO at scale. Is there actually a fit for me, and is there a fit for them on the SEO side? And like, being able to recognize how SEO leads into the business and like how it contributes to revenue, what the success is a big thing. And if you have to work, in my opinion, if you have to work too hard in order to twist it, it's not worth it. If you have to go through like 3 different thought processes, like, oh, well, like, if I go and I write this blog post and somebody reads it, and then they go and they they're more open to it, and then they do more research, and 3 days later they come back, and then they have to go talk to SEO. Like, that funnel's too long. SEO is not like a main acquisition channel, or not a potential main acquisition channel. And like, I want to work at companies where I know that I can have an actual impact. My success, like, is also just predicated on the fact that like, I'm only going to work in companies that I know that I actually have an impact on. Same thing with like whatever clients that I have. Just like, I'm only going to take you on if I think I can actually help. Because if I don't think I can actually help, then like, it's a waste of both of our time. So like, I don't want to waste my time putting on the SEO strategy that I have no confidence in. Like, there's a real reason why I don't take on clients that like need content help, because I know that I know I'm not as good at it as probably you are. Like, it's not in my wheelhouse. Whereas like, anybody that needs like programmatic or product-led SEO, like okay, yeah, like I have a decent amount of experience doing that, and I can help out. And I think it's just like being able to know where your strengths are and where the company's opportunities lie is probably the big thing that separates it.
That's pretty cool. So you came into Coinbase, you were like, okay, I know that there's an explicit need here when people are looking for things that are very, very close to them becoming a customer of Coinbase. And so I can scale that infinitely, and we can make a lot of impact quickly with just some smart strategic product planning and making sure that the front end apps are all aligned to search demand. Now, you said something really interesting, which I want to kind of dig into, which is like, when you're looking at that opportunity, right? Let's say like the founder of Stripe is like, Brian, we need SEO, and I want to hire you, and I want to pay you all the money. And you're like, oh, cool. What are you looking for? Whether is it like, do you know the persona, and you're like, I don't see a clear connection between what's going on in search and like them becoming a customer, or maybe there's like what I call like conversion fat. There's like too much distance between learning about what it is and then becoming a customer. Tell me exactly how you think about that, because that's really fascinating to me.
I think like, Patrick Collison came up to me and was like, I want you to do it. I'm like, you need to explain exactly what your customer journey is and how you think SEO can help. If it's mostly me content, like, dude, I can't help. Like, if somebody's looking up, like, I don't know what people Google for Stripe. I mean, like, Stripe is such a good company. Is SEO low enough in the funnel in order to drive an intentful action on the page? And if it's not, then I'm not interested. or like not interested. I mean, like working with Stripe would be pretty fucking cool, but like I wouldn't be good at that. I mean, like if I have to go and like figure out like do a bunch of keyword research, and I'm like that's like I'm fine. Like that's not a challenge that I'm interested in. I think it's just like being able to know exactly what you're good at and how it ties up with like the company's business goals and whether or not SEO and like where SEO kind of fits in the funnel, right? Of like Stripe campaign is the only thing that they cared about was like, I want a bunch of eyes on the Stripe website. That's a completely different thing than saying I want SEO to drive 20% of Stripe's revenue by 2023. Those are two very, very different goals. And like if Stripe comes like we need SEO to drive 20% of revenue by 2023, and like I'm like, well, I can't do that. Like I'm not like I don't have confidence that I'd be able to do that, because like for me to get the confidence, you would need to go and outline the opportunity, or at least the process in which you're acquiring customers, and like being able to identify exactly where customers are coming in, where they're coming out, how they're doing it, where the conversion is lost, and where it's succeeding. Like that's the important part. And if founders or companies aren't able to go ahead and do that, like then I don't have as much like confidence in it, right? It's like if I'm working with like I don't know like MongoDB or like CockroachDB or something. It's just like, well, I don't know what I would do. Like it's like I'm like you want to hire an SEO person in order to help. I can help you with like your docs, but like is that what you want me to focus my time on? You want more people to be able to find your docs easier? Like what is the actual business use case? And if there isn't one, then like I don't think it's worth my time. But like some people like like I want to work at Stripe and I don't really care about it. And like all hats off to you. Like that's fine. I get really nervous about like people are going to want me to perform. If I don't have full confidence I can perform, then I'm not going to go and place a bet on myself in order to do that.
That's really smart, Brian, as usual.
Oh, that's smart. It might just be like, oh man, you're giving a lot of good opportunities. Just like, well, I'm trying to make myself not look like an idiot, which is like most of what I try to do.
Well, that's a challenge for me, Brian. So that's maybe that's why I'm excited to hear about this. But you said a few things that I think like subtly, some people might be thinking, oh, that's really smart. I hadn't really thought about it that way. Like the Stripe example, like they get a lot of traffic from their technical docs and their like support systems. I've gone through like their site a little bit, and I think you said something really interesting, which is like, okay, you can get traffic by doing these things. It's not like you can't. Anybody can do SEO. The question is like, how much opportunity is there? How close to the buying / conversion process is that, and how much competition, right? Because we used to do SEO at a fintech startup I was at, and some of the transactional, like close to revenue, they were impossible. Like there was just, huge players that have been in there for years. And, you could do it, but you burn a lot of political capital when you come into a company as the growth person. They're all excited to like work with the guy who's going to do SEO. And then 6, 7 months, 8 months goes by and like not like much is moving. And you're like, wow, that sucks. Like that is not good. Like I'm like laughing about it, but like, honestly, like, you have to think deeply about this stuff before you join, especially big companies where, they're putting a lot of investment in capital and resources behind you to do these things. That's really smart. I think that's really cool.
I think going back to like to the Stripe and this docs thing is that like, is SEO going to be driving a lot of incremental revenue for your company? And just like the docs thing, just like, yes, you can increase the amount of people that come in, right? But like, is the people that you're getting in going to end up converting? Like it's like, is it actually incremental? Like sure, like I can definitely see the thing like, oh, like somebody goes to Stripe, they end up on the docs, and they end up converting because like they're like, oh, is the API right? Does it support the needs that I have? Blah blah blah. But like, is it that incremental if you go and like you increase the amount of traffic on there? Like I think that's hard to tease out. Just like in SEO, the question is always just about incrementality, right? And like it's actually really hard to tease apart the bigger companies that you work at, because it gets harder and harder to measure incrementality, because like people Googling Stripe more. It's just like, okay, are your
run commercials, like, run brand commercials and increase branded search. I mean, that might be the
yeah, exactly. And just like Airbnb had the issue where just like, people would use Google as a navigational query. Like people want to get the San Francisco page, but they don't want to go to Airbnb.com and then type in San Francisco, hit the search button. They just type in Airbnb San Francisco and they go and they convert. But is that actually incremental? Like if I've increased traffic with that specific keyword, does it actually count? No, it doesn't. I haven't done anything. It's just that like more people are aware of it, more people using Google as navigational queries. You're not really doing much with it. So I think the hard part is just figuring out like, are you able to drive incremental traffic like incremental revenue to the company? And if you're not, then like, man, maybe you should rethink. Like, you should probably rethink the strategy that you're going on, or if you're trying to decide a role, whether or not the role is going to be right for you.
Yeah, I mean that's a really great point. I mean, like, you know, with paid, it's like you get there quicker, but like the margins stink. And then if you're doing SEO that's like really far away from revenue, you know, your payback period takes forever to get that to a healthy place.
And it sucks for you too, because just like I did a lot of cool work and I can't see what I actually did. Like I can't prove to like leadership that like, oh yeah, like I increased traffic by 20% and that increased revenue by 5%. Like that's awesome. That's great. But like if you're gonna make your own life difficult and you know that it's gonna be an uphill battle, like maybe you like change the strategy, or maybe this doesn't work. And like that's the hard part, right? It's just hard. It's just hard to prove when you're making your own life very difficult. And like maybe like now that we're talking, like maybe I just seem so successful because I've self-selected all companies for like easy wins. And like, oh, Brian's not smart. Like, you go dump any other fucking like half decent SEO in this shit, and they would have been able to execute as well. Like, that's also part of the equation. We're just like, oh, if Strava had talked to you instead, and like, I'm sure that you would have seen the exact opportunity that I did. You've done close to exactly the same thing I did, and maybe you would have driven more traffic, or even if you drove slightly less traffic, it's still like, 4x instead of 5x. Maybe the way that I'm doing this thing just makes it seem as if I'm really smart, because I'm just like, oh yeah, like that seems like a really easy thing that I want to go ahead and do.
You know, this is a perfect poker analogy, because over the years, I didn't think that I was ever the best player in the world or anywhere close to it. But I knew people that were 10 times as talented as me that went broke playing poker against the best people in the world. And here I played only against people that I knew were not very good. And maybe my like ego, or like I wasn't up like as like known as like a great player, but I was good at game selecting and knowing that I cannot beat these players who are way more talented than I am. And just saying, let's just go to the other game that's a little bit lower stakes and like find the opportunity. Like that is if we're going to walk away from this conversation, it should just be like, be very intentional about what it is that you're trying to achieve, whatever it is that you want, whether it's SEO or whatever, some type of growth role. It's like, if you're not clear on what the hypothesis is that you're like trying to solve for, and you need to understand that business, it's not like when you're the head of growth somewhere, there's a million things you could do. You could go spend money on paid. You could go do referrals. You could go do banner ads. Like, you do whatever you want. And so when it comes down to SEO, or like promoting Brian, or like, you know what I mean, investing more in SEO next year, they're just going to look at the numbers. They don't care about what the story is. They've got a model that is like, okay, the ROI of SEO is this. We've increased this much. Like, that's how they're thinking about it. So I think whether or not you like intentionally do that, I think it's like a really cool mental model, is like, where's the path of least resistance and the biggest opportunity for me to have an impact.
Yeah, and that doesn't say to shy away from like, big opportunities. Like, if anybody's listening to this and like, you get the offer from Stripe, that's not to say don't work at Stripe. Like, if you think that you have a way forward, then go ahead and do it. Like, for the record, I never interviewed Stripe. I don't know anything about it.
We love Stripe.
I don't know anything about them. So like, from like my very limited knowledge, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to be able to have that big of an impact. So like, I'm like, it's fine. But like, if you go and you're talking to Stripe and like, you're like, okay, it's challenging, but I see a way forward and I think I can do it. Like, you're only going to grow if you go and you challenge yourself. But like, the thing is just like, don't force it. Just like, don't try to jam SEO wherever the hell that you can, just because like you think it's a good idea. Make sure that you yourself have conviction that like you were able to achieve it. And like me, I was like from my limit, I'm like, that seems really hard. I don't really know where Stripes is. But like, for like, you could say the same thing about Square, but like, Square is integrated with like a bunch of like marketplaces and like restaurants, in which case like all those restaurants have microsites, and you can go ahead and like optimize the fuck out of those microsites. And like, that is a very sensible path forward that you can make.
Sure. Yeah, I think like the other thing too is that we both come from in-house side of things, and like I've always had a revenue number tied to anything that I've done, whether it's paid or SEO or any of the experiments we've done. So you need to have like a very close like connection to the KPI that you're influencing. Like, when you're outside of the internal team, you never really like have that close impact to the numbers. All right, let's wrap it up. So Brian, where can we find you on the internets? And do you have any like things you need to tell the SEO world that maybe we should edit out because it might be a little bit too strong, or like like what should we take away from this, Brian? You're at fanfavorite_BTA on Twitter, BrianTA.io on the internets. Anything you're working on, or anything that you want to especially call out? Anything that you think the world should know about?
No, I mean, like, forget about me. Go find go listen.
Well, Brian, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining the podcast, guys. We will see you soon. Peace.